My name is Eric Daniel Jorgensen. I wrote this book the way Lucretius wrote his poem, not as a paper for a journal, but as a letter to the people who will have to live with the physics. The usual channels cannot carry what I am about to show you. I am going to walk you through every section in order as I figured it out. The equations stay on screen in the wording I used. Then I will say them again in plain speech. If I am right, every particle you have ever named is a rotating black hole, and the Standard Model is not the output of a theory of everything. It is the input. In simple words, I am going to tell you in the first person how I arrived at a single classical construction that recovers relativity, gravity, and quantum mechanics, and why that construction treats every particle as a spinning black hole. The future of humanity in our hostile universe is uncertain. Our survival depends on whether we can leave this one planet. Climate, war, biotech, asteroids, and the disasters we cannot even name because our science is not yet good enough to see them. In a 13.8 billion year universe, 1,000 years is a blink. Newton's Principia made an industrial world. Maxwell made an electric one. The computer I wrote this book on exists because of the quantum physics of semiconductors. Deep space will require something those theories do not yet give us, a theory of everything. I spent my life on black holes. I am autistic. I do not think the answer is strings in extra dimensions or gravity made quantum by force. I think we were a millimeter from the finish line and looking the wrong way. In simple words, we need new physics to leave Earth. Two great theories already work. Gluing them the usual way may be the mistake. I am going to try the simpler path. Today, there are two main theories. General relativity is gravity, space, and time. The Big Bang, black holes, gravitational waves. The quantum field theory that applies to reality is the standard model. From the 96 types of matter waves to the 28 types of force waves, each ripple is a particle. An electron with a left handed spin is a discrete ripple in one matter wave. A photon with a clockwise polarization is a ripple in the electromagnetic field. Glue the two theories together, and the task becomes maybe impossible. We are very close. Maybe the theory was not supposed to be unified the way string theorists or quantum gravity experts describe. Assumptions of vibrating strings, supersymmetry, or gravity being quantum require experiments we cannot even conceive. Sidestepping quantum gravity might be the only way to solve it. With no extra assumptions compared to existing physics, this is the simplest theory of everything candidate I know. In simple words, relativity describes gravity. The standard model describes everything else as ripples in fields. I will not quantize spacetime. I will treat black hole solutions as the particles. This book is also a modern reworking of Lucretius. His poem nearly vanished, then returned in the 15th century. He said, "All things are atoms moving in a void." We kept the spirit and threw out the details. I stay inside science, observation, experiment, consistency. I do not argue about God or the afterlife. Where science is silent, I am silent. I dedicate the work to our descendants and to the scientists who went out into nature, kept what passed the test, and threw the rest away. The approach is a classical field formulation. Whether it is correct or not, the constructions are concrete enough to simulate. The appendix is a complete, runnable proof of concept. Treat the mathematics and the code as the primary content. The prose is only here to make that content legible and to say why I did the work. In simple words, this is natural philosophy in the old sense. Describe the universe, keep what survives a test, and give you the equations and the code so you can say yes or no. Chapter 1: Extreme Scales of Time, Space, and Matter. Before I touch a field equation, I have to ask the question all theoretical physics depends on. How does one measure the void? How can something come from nothing? In simple words, first we learn what time, space, and matter even are, and how far the measuring stick has to stretch. What is time? What is space? What is matter? Time is a single dimension you can walk only forward. Space has no such limitation, but it is three-dimensional, so the arithmetic gets harder. Matter is not a dimension you live in. It is a dimension you can count. Mass is the amount of matter. So matter lives in a three-dimensional space, which evolves in time. Time I picture as a huge line cut into equal segments. If now is vertex t, the only accessible next is t plus 1. Write a game and you first build a clock. Compute frame t, then ask what the player sees after one tick. Relabel, repeat. Space I subdivide the same way I subdivide time. In two dimensions, a rotation mixes the axes. Repeat that rotation and you get every regular polygon. Euler's trick is just that. Turn until you come home, and that full turn is 2 pi. Triangles, squares, and hexagons tile the plane. Pentagons do not, but glue three of them at a vertex and you get a dodecahedron. Only five solids close in three dimensions. I wrote their vertices down by hand. The golden ratio appears for the last two. In four dimensions, there are six convex polytopes. In five dimensions, almost nothing new. Our physical space tiles as the cubic honeycomb. Mass is counting. Prime numbers are the atoms of that counting. 32 identical marbles can be grouped as 32, or 16 pairs, or 8 fours. That is all. Time, space, matter. Now we measure them. In simple words, time is a one-way line of snapshots. Space is a three-dimensional grid you can rotate. The only perfectly regular 3D shapes are the five platonic solids. Mass is how many identical things you are counting. The scale of the universe is beyond imagination, so we drag it down to the everyday with units. Orders of magnitude first. A million marbles is one mega marble. Kilo, mega, giga, tera, peta. Multiply by 1,000 each time. Milli, micro, nano, pico, femto the other way. Now two marbles in the void. Time runs at the same rate for both. Each keeps its motion in a straight line at constant speed. Both have definite positions and velocities. Time we count in seconds. A day is 86,400 of them. Space we address like a city, street, avenue, floor. And the meter is the walk from equator to pole divided into 10 million parts. Mass is resistance to a change of motion, counted in grams. A cubic centimeter of water. Change the units to hours, miles, and pounds, and the numbers change, but the physics does not. We can even throw the units away. The two marbles still do the same thing. That is the clockwork picture. Atoms drifting in the void, completely deterministic. Sadly, that is just the way it is. Or is it? In simple words, seconds, meters, grams are human labels. The physics of two drifting masses does not care what we call the sticks. That clockwork story will break in the next chapter. I came across a new idea that put humanity in perspective. Powers of 10, the film by Charles and Ray Eames. I existed on level 0, cities on level 4, Earth on 7, the solar system on 13, nearby stars on 17, the Milky Way on 21, the cosmic web on 24, the universe itself on 26. We are nothing in the grand scheme, and that is the point. I made three tables of powers of 10 in time, space, and matter, zeroed on 100 microseconds, 2.54 microns, and 100 grams, a particle that travels a few microns in 100 microseconds. 10 rungs out in time is already a week and a half. 10 rungs in space is 16 miles. 10 rungs in mass is a megaton, or, the other way, 10 nanograms. 10 billion looks like a lot. The universe looks almost infinite. Almost. 10 to the 60 is not infinity. It is still a number, and the universe does have scale boundaries. I named them C, G, and H after the three universal constants. For now, they are placeholders. Later, they become the three pillars. In simple words, each jump of 10 multiplies length or time or mass by 10. After enough jumps, you leave the human world. Three walls eventually stop the ladder: the speed of light, the strength of gravity, and the size of a quantum. Why C, G, and H and not some other letters? Because the three limiting factors of our universe are three constants with units. They are not slogans, they are scale walls. C is special relativity, and the constant I write is 1 over C in seconds per meter. G is universal gravitation, and I write 2G in meters cubed per gram per second squared. H is quantum mechanics, and I write H bar, meters squared grams per second. I will give you the measured values when we need them. What matters now is this: some scales are ruled out. That is what it means for a constant to have units. Each pillar of modern physics is a wall you hit when you slide far enough along the powers of 10. In simple words, light speed, Newton's G, and Planck's constant are not decorations. They are the three rulers that say which physics you are allowed to ignore at a given size. Imagine a toy universe where the extremes are not so extreme. I compress powers of 100 into powers of 2. A minute 40 in real life becomes 2 seconds in the toy. A centimeter becomes half a meter. 100 grams becomes 2 grams. The mapping is simple. The exponent stays, the base changes. In the toy, half a unit is 1% in real life. Both universes share a feature at the perimeter. New physics appears. Not because space ends, space may go on forever. The wall is logarithmic. You hit C or G or H and you cannot pass. I made a long table of time, space, and mass exponents, and next to each row I wrote which letters of CGH you must keep. At the origin, all three. Far out in time and space with huge mass, mostly G. Tiny mass, H. Fast and large, C. Our real universe ends at 100 to the 30 because only so much could have happened since the primordial fireball. 13.8 billion years. The toy universe is our universe viewed right after the beginning. So much has happened since that first moment that the real scale became an interesting place to be. In simple words, shrink every factor of 100 down to a factor of 2, and the whole cosmos fits on a table. Wherever you sit near a wall of that table, you must turn on relativity, or gravity, or quantum mechanics, or all three. Chapter 2: The Three Pillars. Newton wrote the physics of the Industrial Revolution. By 1900, the experiments said he was not always right. Three new constants, three new worlds. The fate of humanity rests on unifying them. In simple words, everyday life is the slow, heavy, large quantum limit of three stranger theories. Space and time arrange themselves so the speed of light is the same from every moving perspective. Fast clocks run slow. Fast rulers shrink along their motion. Simultaneity breaks. Nothing outruns light. Time rotates the opposite way from space. The constant is 2.9979245 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. A foot of fiber is a nanosecond of latency. Einstein wrote this in 1905. Saturate at C and time becomes the square root of a negative number. Slow down and you recover Lorentz motion. Slow down more and you recover Galileo. Absolute time, Euclidean space. For many particles, I wrote four n equations. The second derivative of each coordinate against the space-time interval is zero. Every particle travels a straight line at constant 4 velocity. When spatial speed is large, speed through time is large too. When spatial speed is tiny compared to c, everyone shares almost the same clock. The interval itself is the invariant, proper time. Boosts, rotations, translations all keep it. Influence stays inside a light cone. That is why the Eames film stops at power 26. Earth's past light cone is only 13.8 billion light years wide. Across the continent, the wait is a hundredth of a second. To the moon, 2 seconds. Farther, and the look back becomes history itself. In simple words, light speed is the same for everyone, so time and space have to trade. You cannot go faster than light because that would make your personal clock imaginary. What is the same for every observer is not time, it is the space-time interval. All particles attract all other particles with an inverse square field in three-dimensional space. That is why everything falls at the same rate, why planets draw ellipses with the sun at one focus, why a line from sun to planet sweeps equal areas in equal times, why the cube of the semi-major axis tracks the square of the period. Gravity is the acceleration of space itself, sourced by a mass spreading as 1 over r squared. The constant is 6.67408 over 10 to the 14 in meters cubed per gram per second squared. Two cars, a ton each, a yard apart in deep space, still take hours to stick. Newton wrote this to unify heaven and earth. Circular orbits sit at the bottom of an effective potential. Boost at closest approach, and you raise the eccentricity until Kepler's ellipses appear. Boost more, and the orbit opens into a flyby that is almost a straight line. The many particle equation is 3n equations, not 4. In this limit, proper time, retarded time, and coordinate time coincide, so the time equation vanishes. Each pair accelerates toward the other in proportion to mass and inverse square distance. Two bodies make Kepler. Many bodies make chaos, then a cosmic web. Filaments and voids. Clusters held by their own self-gravity. G sets the scale of solar systems, galaxies, universes. When speeds get high, this equation must give way. Here it is exact. In simple words, every mass tugs every other mass. Twice as far means 4 times weaker. Two lonely bodies make ellipses. A crowd of them weaves the cosmic web. Every wave can be thought of as a stream of particles. Kinetic energy is proportional to the frequency of the probability wave. Shorter wavelength means more momentum, so objects can be in more than one place. Particles and waves are the same thing. The waves have discrete harmonics like notes on an instrument, and measuring one particle can reveal correlations in all the others of its type. The quantum constant is 6.6260715 over 10 to the 31 in meters squared grams per second. A microgram of dust on a school desk moves a millionth of an inch in 30 years. Everyday positions and velocities still look definite. Quantum mechanics was built to explain the colors of a fluorescent lamp. It saturates on a bell curve wave packet, uncertainty between position and momentum at a minimum. Spread the wave and you recover Schrodinger. Spread it more, zoom out, and you recover a free point particle. There is only one equation acting on one thing, the wave function psi, which depends on all positions at time t. The square root of -1 rotates psi as time passes, at a frequency set by energy. A particle is a ripple with a definite frequency and wavelength. H sets the scale of those plane waves. The square of the wave function, integrated, is the chance of finding the particles. Measure 1 and you modify the whole function. This equation has a single universal time, so it lacks relativity, and the packets flow freely, so it lacks gravity. We have to let go of assumptions. We start with one particle. In simple words, a particle is a ripple. Its energy is how fast the ripple ticks. Its momentum is how tightly the ripple is packed. The one object that knows all of that is a single wave named psi. Chapter 3: A theoretical CGH physics cube. Three pillars, each on or off is 2 to the 3, 8 equations. Each one answers the same question. If I were a particle, what would I look like from my own outsider's perspective? The observer sits at the origin, classical, at rest. Only the particle obeys the physics we switch on. In simple words, think of a cube whose corners are the 8 combinations of relativity, gravity, and quantum mechanics. No pillars. Acceleration in 3 space is 0. Velocity can be anything, but it stays that thing, in a straight line at constant speed. No gravity. Position and velocity are definite, so no quantum. Absolute time in the background, so no relativity. We lack all three. This is the empty corner of the cube, the Galilean particle. Turn the binary crank. In simple words, with none of the three modern pillars, a particle just coasts. Straight line, constant speed, one universal clock. Switch on C, one particle, special relativity. The Switch on G, Kepler's problem for one particle. Acceleration toward the origin, inverse cube of the radius times gm times the position vector. That is inverse square force in vector clothing. The observer is at the origin. Wait, the Earth orbits the Sun because the Sun is heavier. Yes, I chose the test particle to sit at the origin. Rebase and the physics is unchanged. The mass appears to sit where we are looking from. Next up is one of the most fundamental ideas I ever had: black holes. In simple words, turn on gravity and the particle no longer coasts. It falls around the origin on an ellipse, a parabola, or a hyperbola. Kepler's menu. Switch on C and G. Two gravitating marbles, infinitely far, fall toward each other. Escape speed is the speed at which space itself carries them together. Gravity thins with distance, so close enough the escape speed exceeds light. Space falls inward faster than light can climb. That surface is an event horizon. The marbles are black holes. Mass is the size of that horizon. 1915, Einstein finishes general relativity. Weeks later, Schwarzschild finds the geometry around a simple hole. Far away, orbits look Keplerian. Closer, light bends. Ellipses process into daisies. At 3 radii, circular orbits go unstable. At 1.5, light can orbit, and that orbit is also unstable. At 1 radius, from outside, time stops, the image fades, and nobody sees you cross. I refused coordinates that hide regions. Spherical poles are fake singularities. Cartesian first. Then Eddington-Finkelstein, so the horizon does not blow up. Then Cartesian Kerr-Schild, so the past light cone is global and the observer can sit at the origin as the whole's own image. The metric is Minkowski plus h times a null vector squared. H is 2gm over c squared r, the potential. The null vector points inward along the past light cone, so gravity answers only at light speed. Geodesics of that metric are the orbits: precession, bending, time dilation. Far away, you recover Lorentz and Kepler. New phenomena from known physics. Amazing. In simple words, relativity plus gravity is a black hole. I write its geometry as flat spacetime plus a simple dent that travels inward at light speed. Fall around that dent and clock slow. Ellipses spin, and light can circle once and die. Switch on H. One quantum particle. The spatial Laplacian measures how a quantity differs from its surroundings. On a plane wave, it multiplies by the square of inverse wavelength. I squared is minus 1. Schrödinger, I h bar d psi dt plus h bar squared Laplacian psi over 2m equals 0. The observer at the origin is still a classical free particle. Only the wanderer is quantum. Crank. In simple words, turn on quantum mechanics and the particle smears into a wave that rotates in the complex plane at a rate set by its energy. Switch on C and H. Measure two quantum marbles more and more sharply in distance, and the uncertainty in relative velocity will exceed light speed. When that happens, you have discovered antimatter. Each quantum wave's mass is its own frequency. Schrödinger found a relativistic wave equation in 1925, then abandoned it. Klein and Gordon kept it. Boost with a plane wave, and the rest frequency is mass. Slow, and you recover Schrödinger. Energy becomes kinetic, wavelength becomes momentum. Fast, and the wave rides near the light cone. The equation is the Minkowski-D'Alembertian on psi, minus m squared c squared over h bar squared times psi. Mass has the same sign as time derivatives, opposite to space, so the wave oscillates in time and damps in space. Flip the sign and you get superluminal motion. Do not flip the sign. In simple words, relativity plus quantum mechanics is a wave that cannot be squeezed harder than light speed. Push it and a partner of opposite charge appears. That partner is antimatter. Switch on G and H. Both obey Galileo, so I can slide the observer back to the origin every tick. The observer does not fall and is not quantum. The particle is both. Put Newton's potential into Schrödinger, and the solutions are exactly the hydrogen orbitals. Same periodic table, same ionization spectrum. The only difference is scale. Turn off electricity, and a proton mass gravitating particle has an atomic radius about the size of the observable universe, and a spectrum that ticks once every 40 extra orders of magnitude beyond the age of the cosmos. Heavier particles shrink. Near the Planck mass, relativity would intrude. That is the next corner. Inverse square in 3 dimensions is why electricity and gravity share a chemistry. The equation is Schrödinger plus gm squared over r times psi. In simple words, gravity plus quantum mechanics is a hydrogen atom drawn by mass instead of charge. The shapes are the same. The size is absurd, unless the mass is huge. All three switches on. This is the apex of the cube. Klein-Gordon on the curved Schwarzschild metric in Kerr-Schild form, the relativistic hydrogen atom of gravity. The inverse metric acts with two derivatives on psi, plus a first derivative term from the derivative of the metric, minus the mass term. Solutions involve confluent Hund functions and spherical harmonics. The other 7 equations are the limiting cases of this one. We did it. One equation for one particle of CGH physics. Observer at the origin. Now spin. Like mass, spin is intrinsic. I need the spinning version before I can build a theory of everything. Mass can be any positive number. Spin comes in half steps. The spin of the whole and the spin of the wave must match. That is the next chapter. In simple words, turn on light speed, gravity, and quantum mechanics together, and you get a wave living in a black hole geometry. That is a particle, in every domain, including the ones where a given pillar barely matters. Chapter 4. Rotating black holes are particles. Quantum matter waves are particles. Particles are labeled by mass and spin. Therefore, a rotating hole is a quantum wave, and vice versa. We already have the spin zero CGH equation. Now spin 1, then spin half. In simple words, whatever spin the wave has, the hole must have. We build that match in public. 1964. Roy Kerr extends Schwarzschild to spin. Space-time is dragged, inner and outer horizons, inner and outer ergospheres, where you can steal rotational energy. A hole spinning as fast as allowed has unstable orbits out to 9 radii against the spin, and stable circular orbits with the spin all the way down to the outer horizon. Non-equatorial orbits tilt like a spinning top. The ecliptic itself precesses. I redefine radius. Capital R is the old Pythagorean. Lowercase r includes the spin parameter a, an oblate correction. The potential h becomes 2gm r cubed over c squared times r to the 4 plus a squared z squared, the Appel potential of a ring. The singularity is a ringularity. The null vector picks up a sideways piece, frame dragging. Geodesics are the same formula as Schwarzschild, with this new h and this new L. That is gravity plus relativity, now spinning. In simple words, a spinning black hole twists the space around it. Orbits no longer sit in a flat plane. The point singularity opens into a ring. Proca is Klein-Gordon for a 4-vector. Why a 4-vector, not a 3-vector? Lorentz boosts would skew a 3-vector. A 4-vector's interval is invariant, so it reduces to a Klein-Gordon scalar when you take that interval. In the massless limit, you recover Maxwell with no sources, photons. Written out, it is 4 Klein-Gordon equations plus a constraint. The 4 divergence of psi is 0, so polarization stays perpendicular to momentum. Spin, for a wave, is not a little top. It is how many ways the wave can vibrate when you change perspective. Spin 0 is a number. Spin 1 is a 4-vector. Spin 2 is a tetrad. Now couple Proca to its own Kerr hole. In simple words, a spin 1 particle is a tiny arrow in spacetime. If you set its mass to zero, that arrow's waves are light. The hole and the wave both spin 1. Fix A to h bar over mc. Then write Proca with the Kerr inverse metric instead of Minkowski, plus the extra first derivative term, plus the same constraint with g instead of eta. Cartesian Kerr-Schild saves us. No torsion, constant 4 volume, so Christoffel symbols drop out of the divergence. Vacuum, so Ricci vanishes. That is the spin 1 CGH equation. In simple words, give the black hole the same spin as a photon-like wave, write the wave on that hole's geometry, and you have spinning light plus gravity. I looked online, dusty numerical dash relativity papers. Then a 1975 paper by Gerses and Gersey, the Lorentz covariant treatment of the Kerr shield geometry, a coordinate system where geometry separates from gravity. I wrote a MATLAB script and put that claim through a battery of tests. It worked. A tetrad is a field of inertial frames. Mine is the only tetrad that is Kerr shield, globally Lorentz covariant, represents a particle, and obeys general relativity. This is the most important equation in the book. E to the a mu equals delta plus h over 2 times L to the a times L mu. Apply it and you create a rotating hole from flat vacuum. The metric is eta with two tetrads. The inverse tetrad subtracts instead of adds and undoes the whole. I guessed this tetrad in 2009. Later, every test passed to machine precision. That is what turns a ring singularity from a pathology into a trajectory. In simple words, a tetrad is a little space-time compass at every point. My compass builds a spinning black hole out of empty flat space and can take it apart again. (1928). Dirac extends Klein-Gordon to spin. Four components: electron up, electron down, positron up, positron down. Each is a Klein-Gordon wave. Rotate, and up mixes into down. Boost, and matter mixes into antimatter. Rotate a Dirac wave a full turn and you only get halfway home. 2 full turns to return. That is spin 1/2. I use real Majorana gamma matrices, hats on T, X, Y, Z, because a complex I would smuggle in electric charge, and charge is not a Poincare source. The imaginary unit is itself the product of the four gammas. The Dirac operator is the square root of Klein-Gordon. The equation, gamma A partial A of psi plus I psi mc over h bar equals 0. In simple words, an electron is a four-part wave. Flip your head upside down and the parts mix. Turn all the way around once and it is not the same electron yet. That stubbornness is spin 1/2. Spin half on both sides. Is now h bar over 2mc. The Dirac equation on the Kerr tetrad. Cartesian Kerr shield. Mass m and spin j equal to the particle's mass and spin. The tetrad converts the gamma matrices into curved space. A spin connection term appears. 1/4 times the tetrad times psi times the curl of the tetrad times the commutator of gammas. Then the mass term. This is the full CGH equation for spin half. Bargmann-Wigner. Two copies in parallel with twice the spin parameter give Proca. This is the jumping off point for a theory of everything. I now have a particle that knows light speed, gravity, quantum mechanics, and spin, written on the same tetrad I guessed in 2009 and later confirmed to machine precision. In simple words, put the electron's wave on the electron's own spinning hole compass. That one line is relativity, gravity, quantum mechanics, and spin talking to each other. Chapter 5, My Quantum Relativity Framework. Reality is classical relativistic fields. Classical, you do not apply quantum mechanics to spacetime. Relativistic, Klein-Gordon and its cousins, Lorentz invariant. A field is a value at every event. Particles are not the starting point, they emerge. In simple words, start with fields on spacetime. Let particles show up as ripples and as black hole solutions. Do not start with marbles. The universe obeys Poincare symmetry. 10 transformations that leave the Minkowski interval invariant. 3 boosts, 3 rotations, 4 translations. I write a Lorentz transformation as the exponential of a matrix with boosts k on the symmetric blocks and rotations j on the antisymmetric ones. Time rotates the other way, which is the minus sign in eta. Wigner's classification follows. Mass and spin are the Casimirs. That is why I equated the mass and spin of holes to the mass and spin of waves. Begin with nothing, Minkowski. Add content as black hole particle duality and solve. One of those solutions is our universe, with the standard model Lagrangian as input. In simple words, empty spacetime has 10 ways to slide, turn, and boost without changing the interval. Those 10 ways are why particles have a mass and a spin, and nothing else, as spacetime labels. Make Poincare local and you get Poincare gauge theory. Einstein-Cartan with torsion coupled to spin. I do not couple the standard model to that. Black holes exist whether or not other fields are present, which is a bug if you wanted holes only where fields vibrate. In vacuum, torsion is algebraic and dies without spin, and the stress energy dies without mass. So Einstein-Cartan reduces to vacuum general relativity. Vacuum GR still has solutions. Rotating holes orbit and collide, waves propagate, everything from nothing. Charge is not a Poincare Casimir, so the duality does not source electromagnetism into the hole. Kerr is the most general vacuum solution. Christoffel from the metric, Riemann from Christoffels, Ricci the contraction, R the scalar, and the vacuum equation is Ricci minus half Rg equals 0. Quantize that nonlinear beast and you get gravitons, which I do not want. Quantize the whole solutions instead, not spacetime. That is how I sidestep quantum gravity. In simple words, empty gravity still makes black holes. I treat those holes as particles and leave spacetime classical. No graviton, no extra dimensions. Did you know that electrons, photons, even quarks are rotating black holes? The only difference is size. Heavy particles act more like holes. Light holes act more like particles. They share mass and spin. They live in Cartesian Kerr-Schild coordinates, where the gravitational field separates from Minkowski. Electric charge is set to zero as a source. It can still exist on the field side. The ring singularity maps to a world line. Self-energy is gone because each hole propagates freely on flat background, answering at retarded time. In these coordinates, Einstein's equations become a linear tensor wave equation. Superposition holds. No gravitons, no renormalization, just particle solutions. Hawking radiation assumes quantum fields on curved space. If fields are classical and holes are stable particles, the decay ceases and the duality holds. M black hole equals M particle. A black hole equals JH bar over MC. For the electron, both masses are 0.51 MeV. Both spins a half. For the photon, both masses are zero and spin becomes helicity. 84% of gravitating matter is unknown. 16% is the standard model. Searches for new weakly interacting particles came up empty. If holes are particles, primordial black holes are the remaining dark matter candidate. String theory needs extra dimensions and 10 to the 500 vacua. I need one assumption, Kerr-Schild. Occam prefers the thing we already know exists. In simple words, same mass, same spin, same coordinates. A particle is a tiny Kerr hole. Charge can exist, but gravity does not listen to it. Dark matter can just be more of these holes. Naively summing metrics breaks linearity. The tetrad's null direction misaligns. Instead, I actively transform each source to its rest frame, sum geodesic accelerations and spin transports, not the metrics. Passive boosts off the geodesic would break it again. I guessed a tetrad, then tried to kill it. Metric determinant. 4 volume constant. Tetrad recovers Minkowski. Recovers Kerr. Lorentz transformed copies agree at distant points. Then every test passed to machine precision. I could build the orbiter. Numerical relativity usually brute forces Einstein on a supercomputer. Stay in Kerr shield and you can run it on a laptop. Retarded time by binary search on the past light cone. Proper time for each body. Coordinate time as the common clock. The observer is itself a whole. The code does not need a renderer. Every observer is a black hole, and the gravitons reaching it are like photons collapsing in a retina. Wait, duality is not enough. Every particle is a whole, a Wigner representation, a collapsed classical wave packet, and an observer. We are the singularity interacting with itself. In simple words, many spinning holes cannot be glued by adding their metrics. Boost to each hole's rest frame, add the tugs, boost back. I tested that compass until the computer's rounding was the only error left. One electron is an operator, O underscore E on psi underscore E equals 0. One photon, O underscore gamma on psi underscore gamma. For many identical particles, those operators become partial derivatives in a Fock space, a tower of n particle waves, symmetric for photons Antisymmetric for electrons. The gravitational field stays classical. What is quantized is the particle interpretation of a classical relativistic field. Wave packets can pass through each other like many identical particles without collapse. Entanglement is what you get when you start with several classical packets and then read them as a joint wave. The field is already the wave function. In simple words, many electrons are not many marbles. They are one field that can ring in several places at once, with a minus sign if you swap two of them. Free holes are linear. QED is not. Electrons and photons can appear and disappear. I keep the duality on the free part. Each excitation still obeys its own hole equation, and let the standard model's interaction terms change particle number. You do not need to quantize Einstein-Cartan to get gravity back in. The duality already hands each field quantum a geometry. QED is the low energy corner, electrons and photons. Nuclei need the rest of the standard model. Particle content is an input, not an output. In simple words, holes give you the free particles. The standard model's extra terms let those particles split, merge, and shine. Gravity does not have to be rewritten to allow that. Frank Wilczek and Sean Carroll have called it the core theory. I write the standard model Lagrangian as the last input. Gauge fields for SU of 3 times SU of 2 times U of 1, Dirac fermions in their representations, the Higgs, Yukawa couplings, and the covariant derivatives that make local field symmetries. I am not deriving the particle zoo from the whole. I am handing the zoo to the duality and asking gravity to listen only to mass and spin. 1970 through 2012, from the model's birth to the Higgs, every experiment said yes. Baryons and mesons match. The duality then says each of those field quanta is also a Kerr solution. That is the theory of everything I am offering. Not a new particle list, a new reading of the list we already have. In simple words, the standard model already lists the fields. I do not replace that list. I say each excitation on that list is a spinning black hole, and gravity is the sum of those holes. Chapter 6, A Leonard Jones Fluid. The duality was about fundamental particles. The world we touch is atoms bumping into atoms. I need a bridge. In simple words, zoom out from holes and waves until you can pour a liquid. Atoms are not fundamental, but they behave as if they were little marbles with a soft shell. Close in, they shove, the Pauli exclusion of electron clouds, which I write as 1 over r to the 12. Farther, they tug, van der Waals, 1 over r to the 6. That is the Lennard-Jones potential. Put many of them in a box, integrate Newton, and you get gas, liquid, crystal, depending on temperature and density. This is the proof that the particle picture, once you allow a short-range shove and a longer-range tug, already makes chemistry's everyday phases. I do not need a new ontology for a glass of water. I need the standard model at the bottom, and this potential as a summary of what those fields do when they clump into neutral atoms. In simple words, atoms bounce when they get too close and stick a little when they sit near. That one sentence is ice, water, and steam. Add gravity as a weak extra one over R. On a table, it does nothing a chemist would notice. On a cloud of a million stars, it is the only force left. The same inverse square we met in Kepler now gathers the Lennard-Jones particles, or, at cosmic scales, the black hole particles, into filaments and voids. Dark matter in this picture is not a new fluid. It is the 84% of rotating holes that do not carry standard model charge. They still source H in Kerr's shield. They still tug. The cosmic web is the many-body problem of Chapter 2, rewritten in the language of the duality. In simple words, between atoms, gravity is a whisper. Between galaxies, it is the architect. Same law, different crowd. Chapter 7: Hydrogen and Helium. If the duality is right, the universe's simplest atoms and the universe's first minutes should already know about it. In simple words, look at what the cosmos actually made, then tell the story of how it made it. Look at the universe's shopping list: hydrogen first, helium a strong second, a dusting of lithium, then a long climb through carbon, oxygen, iron, maiden stars, and supernovae. I tabulated abundances, masses in MeV, charges, and spins, alpha particles, protons, electrons, and the rest. Charge is listed for completeness. It does not participate in the duality. Mass and spin do. The light element abundances are not a hypothesis of mine. They are measured. Any theory of everything has to leave them alone. In simple words, the universe is almost all hydrogen and helium. That is a fact the duality must swallow, not a fact it gets to change. I wanted a single chemical formula for the cosmos, the way water is H2O. The mix is a recipe: so many protons, so many alphas, so many electrons, a trace of heavier nuclei, and a dark remainder that only gravitates. Write it that way, and you see the dualities split in the ingredients list. The luminous part obeys the standard model. The dark part is holes that never learned electromagnetism. In simple words, if the universe were a compound, most of the mass would be an ingredient that does not shine. Atoms have structure: nucleus, electron cloud, orbitals we already met as the G plus H corner of the cube. Nuclei have substructure: protons and neutrons, themselves quarks. In the duality, each of those is a Kerr solution with its own mass and spin. Chemistry is electromagnetism plus Schrödinger. Nuclear physics is the strong force plus the same idea. Gravity, at these scales, is a spectator, except when a star dies and a hole is the leftover. In simple words, cloud, nucleus, quark. Three nested shells. The duality says each shell is still a spinning hole wearing a different field. The Big Bang is not a hypothesis like my black hole idea, and it is not a television show. It is the story of how everything came to be: a hot, dense beginning, expansion, a plasma that cools. At a microsecond, the universe is still radiation dominated and needs supermassive seeds to spark structure. Without stages of matter and hole formation, galaxies would be impossible. Radiation pressure drops, and a scaffolding of black hole dark matter roughens. Nuclear fusion into alpha particles, helium, locks in the abundances we still measure. Trace nuclei are nuclear fluff. When that mix nears a hole, the hole grows. Photons fall slightly out of equilibrium. Primordial black holes remain. Intangible matter, 84%, interacting only by gravity. A hole is a natural consequence of the three pillars. In a sense, every black hole is the CGH cube, run to its endpoint. The chronology is standard cosmology. The ontology is mine. The dark scaffolding is the same object as the electron, written large. In simple words, the universe expanded and cooled, cooked hydrogen and helium, and left behind a web of dark holes. Those holes are not a new species. They are the duality, at the mass of planets and stars. organized by the CGH physics cube, synthesized into the simplest theory of everything by the black hole particle duality. If a candidate explains everything with no extra assumptions and then gives predictions already found, the duality must be confirmed. We walked extreme scales to walls with units. We unified three pillars into one particle. We asserted the whole idea, built a theory compatible with known physics, and looked at its predictions. I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to run the code, to try to break the tetrad, to say yes or no. Survival as a species should motivate us to take an ultimate theory seriously. It is not as bad as it seems. Everything in the universe can be explained via the laws of physics, and those laws are well tested. We were a millimeter from the finish line. In simple words, I offered a cube, a duality, and a program. The rest is a test, not a sermon. Is the universe a computer simulation? I will not answer that with metaphysics. I will answer it with a program. If a theory can be integrated on a laptop, retarded times, tetrads, many holes, a player who is also a whole, then the ontology is computational in the only sense I care about. It is explicit. The appendix is not a metaphor, it is the argument in Python. In simple words, if you can run it, you can try to kill it. That is the kind of simulation I mean. Gurses and Gurse, 1975, Lorentz covariant Kerr shield. Alawadi on the spin connection, a wave function paper for the many particle section, a standard model Lagrangian reference, chondritic mineral data for the abundances. The rest is Einstein, Schwarzschild, Kerr, Schrödinger, Klein, Gordon, Proca, Dirac, and Newton. I do not trust anything online without a test. That is why the next section is code. In simple words, the duality sits on papers you can look up and on tests you can rerun. Appendix A, two programs. First, a Kerr shield test suite. Build the tetrad, check the determinant, recover Minkowski, recover Kerr, Lorentz transform actively and passively, compare. Spin connection from Alawadi, omega is the difference of tetrad derivatives. Only the perturbation contributes. A Dirac step on a small grid, mass and spin matched, still a work in progress on the duality. Second, the black hole orbiter, grid-free numerical relativity. Every particle is a rotating hole, a field quantum, and an observer. Retarded time lookup, proper time advance, coordinate time sync, acceleration summed in aligned frames. I tested in-spiral versus central force. It only in-spirals when the test mass matters. I swapped axes to check spin-orbit coupling. 3 or more bodies. Ultra-relativistic clocks skip ticks, as they should. Then I reached for a renderer and realized I already had one. The caption on the Pygame window is Black Hole Orbiter, Body Frame Camera. That is the view from inside the theory. In simple words, the appendix is a lab. One script tries to break the compass. The other flies many spinning holes and looks out from one of them. On the Nature of Things. Written by Eric Daniel Jorgensen, version 1.2. Dedicated to our future descendants and to the scientists throughout history. Science is a way of thinking much more than it is a body of knowledge. Keep the ideas that pass the test. Reject the ideas that fail. I walked you through my reasoning. Now the test is yours. Thank you for sitting with me for 155 minutes. In simple words, the film is over. The equations are still on the page. Download them if you want to keep them.